I had trouble just staying put. I always wanted to know what the next thing was. I understood finally that there were a million different things that I could be doing if I just had the imagination to find them.
I feel like entrepreneurs are very susceptible to anxiety and maybe even depression and just feeling down, where they're not able to just tap into creativity more because of like the workload.
Oh, I gotta go. I've been working, told them please don't hit my phone. I'm in my zone, bruh, just leave me alone. Was on the road, but I swear I'm coming home. Now the drinks on me, I think we need a toast. See, I did it for me. Now my old friends calling, told them nothing's for free. Told me time is money, dog, swear I paid all my fees. I was starving for this game, now my family can eat.
Hey everyone, before we start the show, a quick word from our sponsor, the American Nurse Association, which is a professional group that's trying to advance the nursing practice. It's there for us to help standardize nursing, it helps bolster our health and wellness and every single aspect of nursing.
Feeling lucky? Well, the ANA is feeling awfully generous. They're giving away one free copy of Nursing Scope and Standards, 4th edition, as well as some other cool prizes. One winner will receive a MacBook Air, 5 winners will receive iPad minis, and 15 winners will receive some awesome Sony wireless headphones.
Don't forget that this giveaway does not last long, so go to the nursingworld.org or click the description below to enter.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the Couple Nurses podcast with your hosts, Matt and myself, Peter. Before we get into the show, make sure you guys check out couplenurses.com and wearefrontlinewarriors.com. We have a bunch of cool content there, a bunch of blog posts. We share all our YouTube videos there, our vlogs, and our show notes, especially if you guys like the information that we provide even more through our show notes, so definitely check them out. And that's with literally each episode. Make sure you check us out, guys, on YouTube, Couple Nurses. I'm sure you guys already know that. And give us the like on Spotify and follow us on Apple Podcasts. We're literally on every platform. So check us out before the episode starts. Just on that.
Thank you. On today's episode, we'd like to welcome Catie Harris. Catie Harris is the owner and founder of Nursepreneur. Nursepreneur is committed to supporting nurses across the globe with their crazy, outrageous ideas and innovative ideas. Her path is to change healthcare through entrepreneurialism. We dive in from bedside nursing to acute NP to starting your own business. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Let's go.
Thank you, Katie, so much for being here. Can you give us a little bit about yourself, like your nursing experience and where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on. Oh my gosh, I've been a nurse for 20 some years. And I always remember like when I first started out in nursing, there would always be like that nurse that had been on the same unit for the last 20 years. And I was like, oh, that's never going to be me. And then 20 years later, that was me. It was like one of those revelations where I'm like, I need to keep moving. And that was one of the things that really, I think, defined my nursing career was that I had trouble just staying put. I always wanted to know what the next thing was. So after getting off orientation, and then you kind of master the bedside, and then I'm like, all right, I'll go to ICU. So I went to ICU, and then it was like, okay, now what? And early on, I ended up doing my MBA because I thought that, I had these visions of grandeur that I was going to take over the world and rule the hospitals and all the whatever that vision was. So I thought I should get my MBA. So I did that. And when I graduated with my MBA and started looking at jobs, by this time I was working agency I made my own schedule, my own work hours. I was actually the most senior nurse on the one unit that I was working on that I oriented the other nurses, whenever I felt like coming in. It allowed me to travel. I would take off 2 or 3 months at a time and then, come back and work a lot and then, take another couple months off and just travel. So I did a whole lot of that in my 20s, but I also realized that once I achieved that MBA, that I had to start in a starter position in finance or somewhere. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that because I'm making way too good money. I got lots of time off, but I was kind of stuck on the floor. So I've always worked neurocritical care, neurosurgery. So I decided, well, I'll go back for my nurse practitioner degree. that seemed the next logical step. So that's what I did. And I worked with the neurosurgeons for, oh my gosh, 10, 15 years. And it just got to the point where I had seen the residents come in to the residency, and I had seen them graduate, and now I was working with them as attendings, and I saw them go up this ladder, this hierarchy, and they went on to newer, bigger, and better things, but my role stayed stagnant, and every morning I would come in and I'd have to get the news of the day from the intern, and then 15 times a day I'd have to round with this intern and then sign out to the intern. And it got to the point where I would show up at the hospital and just be really pissed off. Sorry, this is like a G-rated podcast, but I was really, really angry and found myself kind of bitter and irritable, and just I didn't like myself at the end of the day. It was horrible. And it was one of those things where I didn't know what I wanted, and I didn't know what to do. I felt like I was stuck in this bubble because I was an acute care nurse practitioner, and I was working on the unit. And I mean, what else could I do other than work in the hospital? And I was fortunate enough that an opportunity fell in my lap. So Walmart literally called me one day and wanted to know if I knew a nurse practitioner who could run their clinics from their corporate headquarters. And I was like, oh my God, please take me. And they did. I mean, that wasn't my interview, but they did hire me. And I started meeting all these nurses from all over the world that were absolutely fascinating. And it really just blew my mind. And it burst the bubbles, so to speak, because I understood finally that there were a million different things that I could be doing if I just had the imagination to find them. So that's kind of my journey in a nutshell.
Yeah, I'm curious, what drew you into neuro? And by the way, we're not rated G for our podcast. You could feel free to say whatever you would like.
Okay.
But what drew you to neuro? Because I've personally never liked neuro very much, so I'm curious on why did you choose neuro?
Okay, so this was a mean trick that the universe played on me, because when I graduated nursing school, I said, there's no way I'm ever working nights, and I'm never going to work on a neuro unit because I hate neuro and it just sucks. So I graduated in 96. I actually traveled for a bit. I was in Australia for 6 months. And then when I came back in 97, there was still a surplus of nurses, which is unusual. It's not something we normally see. And so I couldn't get a job in the Philadelphia area. So I got 2 job offers. I put in my application all across the United States. I got 2 job offers. One was Roswell, New Mexico, and the other one was South Texas. But it was a night position on a neuro unit. And I was like, oh my God, well, I'm not going to Roswell, with all the aliens and stuff. So I'm like, I'll go to South Texas. So I went down there, and I thought, I'll just spend 6 months to a year here, get my experience, and move on. So I went down, got my experience, and I wanted to move up to Houston because I've always been in the big city. I'm in Philadelphia. I've always loved the big city. So I moved up to Houston, and I really wanted shock trauma, but they didn't have any positions open. And the only position that was open was neuro at night. So I'm like, all right, fine. So I took neurocritical care at night, and I was there for a couple of years, and then came back to Philly. And the only position that was open was neuro ICU at night. So I took that position again. And that's when I started my MBA and started agency. And the agency started me off in a night position on a neuro unit. So it was just fate. Like the universe was not going to let me get away from neuro. So
I noticed that you mentioned Walmart took you upon to run all the clinics on it. How was that experience? Because I'm sure that's where you start cultivating that entrepreneurial mindset, right?
yeah, I mean, I've always had the entrepreneurial mindset. I've always wanted to do things. I've always kind of dabbled in stuff. And I'm the type of person that would I get an idea or epiphany, and I'll have a napkin, and I write this idea down, and it's great, and I'm going to do it. And the next day I wake up and I'm like, there's I can't do it for whatever reason. And there's just a whole bunch of mindset blocks there. So yeah, it was really convenient for Walmart to fall in my lap, because I just didn't have, I guess, the confidence to go out on my own to start. And when I started meeting these other nurses that were out there, I thought, well, why am I not doing these things? And, I just realized I didn't know that I could. And that's like a terrible excuse. for not doing anything in my life, for so long. But um, yeah, I guess I didn't really have the time to look out there and see what other people were doing. But yeah, that was great. And so a couple years after I started Walmart, I had the experience of corporate layoffs because they were going through and doing a bunch of corporate layoffs. And that was extremely stressful. And I was like so thankful by the time they came around and laid off my position and a few others at my division or at my level, because it was so stressful. But as soon as I was fired, I was like, I want another, well, not fired, but laid off. I'm like, I want another one of those jobs. But it wasn't really corporate. It wasn't really corporate healthcare that I really wanted. It was just that different experience. I loved the growing and the learning. And I took a job that I had no idea what it was about. I was the senior manager for talent acquisition, and I'm like, I don't even know what this role is. Like, I had to look it up online, try and read books about it, and yeah. But I love doing that kind of stuff.
So I know nurses are very adaptable to different situations, everything that they do. So why do you think nurses are such great entrepreneurs?
Uh, because as an entrepreneur, you basically start off funding yourself. You're working on a shoestring budget. You've got like no resources, and you've got to make everything work. You got to put it all together. You got to make critical decisions, and that's what I think we're good at. We're really good at uh, being given a problem and saying, go solve it, but we're not going to give you any money or resources. So, and nurses are really good at that. They've always been good at that. And if you look at any healthcare system, that's kind of how, I mean, I seriously think they bank on the fact that the nurses will find a solution to whatever problem that they throw at them with very little money and resources behind it. And it's a perfect skill set for entrepreneurialism.
Yeah. What's like your first, you could say, successful thing that you started doing outside of like the nurse practitioner route?
The first successful thing, well, that's a loaded question. Yeah. Um, yeah. So in terms of business, so I had businesses that were different degrees of successful, I would say. So I started a business as a first assist, freelancing myself out to the neurosurgeons. So I was able to assist them in surgery, and instead of having the hospital pay me, I worked it out to work kind of, if you will, a quote unquote, in a consultant role. And I did my own billing and charging, and made way more money with it that way. And then was able to bring in other nurses and train them to work as first assist for that business. So, and that was fine. And it went really well for some time. But I don't love the OR, and it wasn't something that I wanted to do long term. So it wasn't really a great fit, and it just kind of fizzled. So, I mean, it was successful in that I generated money from it. It was not successful in that I didn't pursue it long term, or just kind of let it fade away.
Yeah, but that was a really good idea though, because instead of being at the hospital being there to pay you out, you got rid of the hospital and you got paid direct. So you essentially made a lot more money that way.
Right. So I was able to build the insurance companies for what I was doing.
Right, right. Yeah, so that's very smart, like cutting off the hospital like that and just doing your own thing.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it definitely averages out much better, and you'd be amazed at how much money the hospital. I mean, the surgeries are the backbone for any hospital. That's what pays everybody's salary, and you'd be amazed. They have like these junior billers that don't follow up. Like, I would get paid the surgeon's fee because the hospital never bothered to bill for the surgery that I was in. So I would get like thousands of dollars for like, you know, squirting saline into a little hole. And it's just like, this is a great gig, but it's so boring.
Yeah, yeah, that's smart
Wow.
though. Yeah.
How did you finally transition away from nursing?
Well, I would say I never transitioned away from nursing. I still feel very much a nurse, but out of the hospital system for sure. And that was much easier than I care to admit. And because it got to the point where I was so frustrated being in the hospital system and so just burnt out, and I have ideas, and they'd be like, no, just do what we told you to do, type of thing, and sign out to the intern and that kind of crap. And I was miserable. So I went in less and less and less, and COVID helped knock it all out because, I was like, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore.
What's the hardest thing for you? Like, for example, the hardest thing for me to do is I have a lot of ideas, but the hardest thing for me to probably do is taking action, you could say. So how do you prevent yourself from like not taking action and actually following through with your ideas?
Yeah, so I've had that problem for years, and I'll tell you the one thing that really motivated me was a negative comment that my brother made one time because I'd started a lot of businesses, and never I kind of let them fall to the wayside. I actually started IV Hydration like 10 years ago, and I bought all these brochures and supplies and stuff, and then just never handed out the brochures, and was like, oh, well, I guess nobody really wants this, no, it was really dumb. But so that business kind of fell to the wayside. And when I started Nursepreneurs, my brother made this comment and he goes, yeah, I wonder how many weeks or months this is going to last before you let it fizzle out. And it really, it really got under my skin. It like triggered me. And I was like, well, that's a jerk thing to say. And so I said to myself, I'm going to prove him wrong this time. And so that's kind of I don't know if that's like a warped way to start a business, but it's been like the most powerful motivator is to prove him wrong, and that I'm not like this, flaky, silly nurse that can't do anything, right? Or can't follow through or can't believe in myself. But it's been a long road for sure. It wasn't like he made that comment and then I had success. It's been like 5 or 6 years now. So
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people have that issue where they have a good idea, they started, but then the energy for creation and keeping it going kind of fizzles out, like for you, and then it kind of just get put on a back burner, and you stop fully committing into it.
Yeah.
yeah.
And also, the way you explain it is you have everything on your back and a low budget. So I feel like entrepreneurs are very susceptible to anxiety and maybe even depression and just feeling down, where they're not able to just tap into creativity more because of like the workload. Like we've had that ourselves where we're so busy with things where you can't be as creative with your work because you can't tap into that realm if you're not in like a focused state, let's just say. So
Yeah, absolutely.
my question is, what business advice would you give to somebody that's starting off, or especially being like a single mom?
I would say, because I started my business when my son, he's 8 going on 9 now. So it's been 6 years. So he was like 2 or 3 around there. And I've always been a single mom. I'm actually a single mom by choice, which is my son was sperm donation and all that kind of good stuff, which your listeners probably don't want to listen to. But he was also a big motivator too, because I wanted him as he was growing up to see that he could be proud of me and what I'm doing. So that was a big motivator. I wanted to stick with something, but it was also just the whole aligning, I think, yourself with something that you're passionate about. So when I first started this business, what it started out with was kind of an outsource of Walmart. And I had to recruit these nurse practitioners. So I thought, well, why don't we have a blog, and I'll create a blog. So I went and discovered courses on how to start a blog and then how do you make money off a blog and all that kind of stuff. And then thought, well, the other thing that these nurse practitioners need when they first come out is new grad transition. So, I could start that business. And I thought, well, let me start these 2 businesses first, and then I'll do what I really want, which is to consult nurses with, businesses that they're growing or help them to grow their businesses. And it was just this really kind of backwards way of thinking where, I thought I had to do something else and be successful at that before I could do what I really wanted to. But I could never find the motivation or the creativity, like you just spoke of, to do those things that I didn't really, not that I don't care about new grads transitioning, it's just I wasn't passionate about it. Whereas I was still doing in my free time, helping nurses around me to start NCLEX businesses and IV hydration, stuff that I couldn't see through, I could help other people. So it was just kind of this weird dynamic. And so it was finally aligning with something that I actually like to do, that made the difference.
Okay, so definitely being aligned, because that's that internal motivation or inspiration that you have day in, day out to continue working on the goal that you set yourself forward.
Yeah.
So now looking back at everything that you've done in life, and especially being the nursepreneur and going through the journey, are you able to pinpoint like a blueprint of steps or stages that you went through in order to get to where you were?
Yeah, and that's something that I put out into multiple different courses. I have it all in a lot of my free videos and stuff. And really the first thing I always have, even when I do discovery calls, just have the nurses talk about themselves. Because one of the things that I'm listening for is where they light up and where do they get excited. Because I had a nurse one time who called me and she wanted to be a health coach. And I swear she got more and more depressed every time she talked about it. And I'm like, oh my God, this nurse, like, and this health coaching, like, I'm so depressed just talking to her. And then another nurse needed help with tech, and you wouldn't believe the change, like the visible change in this woman when she started talking about tech and, oh, I can help you with this, and I have a computer science degree, and she got really excited and animated. And I was like, Juanita, why don't you just do that? And it was just like one of these things where she couldn't wrap her mind around the business model. So that's one of the first things that I like to do is just explore and see where they get animated. And you can certainly do this yourself, like when you're talking about stuff. If you were thinking, oh, I'm going to be a health coach, but your whole body language just kind of dampens and your voice dampens when you're talking about it, it's not the right move. Like there's other businesses out there that you could start. But on the other spectrum, I have nurses that are so overwhelmed with like, I could do this and this and this and this and this and this, and they're not really listening to what it is that they want to do. They're seeing like, it looks like I can make a lot of money if I do this. And basically any business you can make a lot of money with, but they all require a lot of work and effort on your part. So you have to really be excited about what you're doing.
What do you think is the greatest roadblock in this journey for maybe yourself or any nursepreneur that you have
And how to get
coached?
past it too.
Yeah, the biggest roadblock is yourself. I can't tell you how many problems I threw in my way. The first year I did webinars and I made money on them, and then I stopped doing them. And like 10 months later, I was working with a coach and I'm like, yeah, I can't make any money. And he's like, well, have you ever made any money? And I said, yeah, I was doing webinars. And he's like, okay, so let me get this straight. You were doing webinars, you made money, and then you stopped. And I said, well, when you say it out loud like that, it sounds stupid, like, yeah, the one thing that I was really good at making money with, I stopped, yes. And he's like, well, why don't you start doing webinars again? And I said, that's a good idea. But the problem there wasn't that, the only real problem was when people gave me money, it made me feel weird. And I felt responsible and I felt like a fraud. And I felt like, somebody's going to discover me if I kept doing this and accepting money. And so I had to go through all of these emotions and all these feelings and all these like, what was I doing? Was it like, it's not like I was offering a bad course. It was a really, really good course. Actually, it was too much of a course for the price point. But it's a weird feeling to be afraid of receiving money and having that burden when somebody gives you money of having to produce some kind of result for them. So I almost took on their problems as well, and it was like stressful too.
So I was mentioning that it's almost like you went through imposter syndrome,
Oh
where you
yeah.
had to just overcome that entire stuff. I'm aligned with my purpose, what I'm doing. This is in a good way. I'm helping people, because I feel like that's also like the poor man's mentality, where we don't want a lot of money because we think it's bad because we're taking from people. But just because we're taking money is just a transactional item that could be used to push anything and fuel whatever, just like a passion, right?
It's hard to like give yourself monetary value because, like you said, you feel like you're taking advantage of people, and that's like kind of weird. It's like a weird feeling to have, but it's like something that we have to get past, because eventually you're gonna need some kind of income coming from this. Otherwise, you're gonna fail. So it's something that we all have to get past. Same, like you said, it's all about yourself. You're basically your only barrier, and once you could get past that mindset, you're basically free to do at your will. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you take care of yourself with everything that you're doing and struggling? Do you have like a routine or self-care essentials that you always stick to?
Or some hobbies.
I don't have any hobbies. My my hobby is my business. I do need hobbies. I used to I always say I played tennis, but I haven't played tennis in 20 years, so I don't think that counts. So someday I'll get back to tennis, and you know, raising my son is a hobby, if you will. Um, but yeah, how do I take care of myself? So one of the things that's really, really important to me is to have a lot of downtime. And this is something very, very difficult for new entrepreneurs because one, you're still working your full-time job. And I was working my full-time job and my part-time job and starting a business and, you know, a single mom. So, you know, it's definitely, you have to space stuff out and know that you're in for the long haul, that you're not going to get rich in 20 days or less or any other ridiculous marketing messages like that. But, you know, just being very kind to yourself about how much you can physically get done in a period, but then also reserving a lot of space to just think. And this was a lesson that I learned when I was doing my PhD, because I was working like 80 hours a week with neurosurgery as a nurse practitioner and trying to do my dissertation. And for 2 years, I couldn't make any progress on it. So I finally was like, all right, I have to get this proposal out. Otherwise, they're going to kick me out of school. And I took 6 weeks off. And it was actually a program that I was with that but regardless, it was down in Santiago, Chile. And I literally walked for 6 weeks. And when I came home, I wrote that proposal up and was done within a matter of 2 weeks. So 2 years to 2 weeks. And it's the same thing with my business. I value a lot of downtime. So I will schedule like 2 or 3 hours where sometimes I'll just stare at the wall, or I'll go for a walk, or I will just do something that's not business related, because it allows ideas to percolate, to connections to be made. And all of a sudden I'll be shopping. I'm like, oh my God, you know, I know exactly what to do now. You know, something will trigger it. So trying not to force the ideas, but to let them come out, and that downtime is super important.
It's almost like runner's block. And I feel like it's very true. You have to take time for yourself, because imagine, or I'm not sure if it's the same way, but some of my best ideas I feel like come in the shower, and that's like one of the only times where I'm not thinking about business or what I have to do or my plans. I'm just there showering, you know, and that's when like ideas come to flourish, because you're not really hyper focused on solving a problem. And I think that's very important. Is there any projects you're currently working on?
I'm sorry, any what?
Any projects you're currently working on?
So we launch courses for nurses who have done businesses. So we work on that, but we're also working on the one thing that we're finding is that after the nurses have put their business together, they need help with marketing, and they're not sure what to do. And marketing is the most expensive, time consuming, and the biggest part of your business. So we're working on developing marketing for YouTube channels, and we have an Instagram marketing account now as well, and just helping with those aspects, and constantly looking for new business ideas for the nurses.
Yeah. So do you work on like on branding, something like in that sense?
So we do branding in terms of fonts and colors, and for your website, we haven't focused so much on messaging. A lot of that's built into the programs that they start, like if they're doing IV hydration or cannabis or whatever the case may be. So a lot of that messaging is built out by the course directors to help them to get started.
Where do you see like the job outlook for nursepreneurship? I know there's a ton of social media influencers and nurses that I'll scroll through that are starting little shops, or they're creating Etsy accounts or doing something. So where do you see the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think that stuff is great if you have a huge following, like hundreds of thousands of followers, but most of us don't have that type of influence. So the consulting, I think, is huge for nurses. Our knowledge base, what we know about the hospital system, how things work. I have one student that is a long-term care turnover specialist. So she actually goes into nursing homes that are about to go bankrupt and can turn them around. So there's other nurse practitioners that are looking to do the new grad transition that I had thought about years ago. IV hydration is a big business for a lot of our nurses. Concierge nursing is another huge area that just is, it's an open field. We're literally just defining it. Now we're pioneering new specialties. I was actually talking to a nurse yesterday and she's like, can I do pulmonary concierge nursing? I'm like, well, nobody's done it before, but that doesn't mean it can't be done. It's something to explore, and you just have to be open to, it may not end up the way that I thought it was going to, but I'm going to listen to what the audience wants and pivot as needed.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a big push for preventative care and preventive services. Like even with IV hydration, I could see people getting like a monthly like wellness checkup, for example, and like
whole telehealth.
yeah, like a quick physical more commonly and more often than they do now. So it's definitely like I feel like a good venture to go into. Anything really with preventative, even like
Yeah.
research based, like you see these stem cells clinics opening up a little bit more often. It's not FDA approved yet, but there's some people that still open them up, and they get a lot of people get a lot of benefit from this because it's just research.
Yeah.
If we could figure out how to prevent certain diseases compared to continuously treat them with like almost an never-ending goal, then we would move forward a lot better as a society and
Oh,
in total
yeah.
health. Yeah. Because right now, what we see is somebody gets diagnosed with something, and we don't really focus on the prevention. We focus on what's going to happen after. And the goal usually is to have you not say get better, but not get worse. That's the problem with, I think, healthcare. The goal is
Yeah.
to if you're at this point in life, let's not make you worse. But there isn't a push for making you better. It's just to maintain where you are at right now and not get worse.
Unfortunately. And it's exciting what's happening with entrepreneurships, because I feel like nurses are going to be more empowered. Sometimes with bedside, everything we're doing, it's sometimes demoralizing, and this could maybe rejuvenate our medical professional. So if
Yeah.
one of our listeners are listening and they're doing bedside nursing and they feel like they have a passion or there's something they're interested about, how do you begin your journey? How do you begin your journey of entrepreneurships? Where do you look?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that you can do is just start looking for problems, and that might not sound very appealing, but one of my first businesses was it was a stroke patient who just would not leave the hospital, and I was like, my God, here, take my phone number, just get out of here. I need this bed. But they were so thankful for that, and they only called me a couple of times, and I thought, well, maybe this could be something, right? Like maybe I looked into it, and Medicare had these transitional care codes, so that helped me with pricing and stuff. But basically, the concept was, once the stroke patients were discharged from the hospital to home, a lot of them just needed some comforting words, or just somebody to listen to them, or say, I have a twinge, what do I do? And the default mechanism was to say, well, go to the ED, because the residents didn't want to deal with them, and the outpatient office didn't want to deal with them, so they'd send them to the ED. And I'm like, well, this is ridiculous. All they needed to do was hear somebody say, like, everything, that's normal, right? And that's what people appreciate in the hospital, that they feel safe there, even though might be annoying to have somebody come in your room every 5 minutes. At the same time, there's a lot of comfort in that. So I wanted to extend that. So that was one of a very early iteration of a business model that I had of concierge nursing.
Yeah, it's a very good point that you say that the route of entrepreneur is usually figuring out a problem and trying to solve it. And it's the same thing you did with the whole marketing. You're able to help nurses create these businesses. What was their next problem? Their next problem was marketing. So let's solve another problem. And that's always a good place to start, because you're always going to be monetized. You're always going to be able to monetize that, because someone is always willing to pay you something if you could solve their problem.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I've had that experience. I've had some very costly mistakes where I was like, well, the nurses need this, and I went to all the trouble to design it and build it and put it out there, and it was just like crickets. And I'm like, well, they do need it, but it wasn't what they asked me for. So I'm like, all right, well, just my most costly expenses have been when I didn't listen to what they were asking me for. So I just try as hard as possible to stick to what they're saying, whether I agree with it or not. We have a lot of MLMers in my Facebook group, and they'll say, oh, you can triple your income in the next 2 weeks if you join my, MLM pyramid, or whatever it is. And I was like, well, and they'd get like hundreds of comments. Everybody's like, oh, me. Tell me, how do I do this? And I thought about it, and I'm like, okay, I don't agree with it. I'm not going to go out there and say triple your income, and it's going to be no effort, and you just have to sell some stuff to your friends. But there's something about being consistent, fast, and easy, and the done for you. So, looking at that and saying, how can I take what I already have and make it as easy, predictably consistent, and fast as physically as fast as possible for the nurses. And that's been my goal, to really hone in on that.
Yeah, it's very important because time is something you can never get back. And if you can make
Yeah.
something work quicker and more efficient, then there's a giant profit for that as well.
Yeah.
You could sell it to anybody. If you could add more time to their day or add more time to their life, it's something that's always going to be there.
Katie, what is your current obsession? I know it's your business. Is there maybe something specific in the business that you're very obsessed about that you're working on?
I really love kind of the partnerships and the networking and the traveling. So I have made it, before COVID, I was traveling around the US, just going to meetups, and I've met so many amazing nurses and made so many incredible connections just by going to other cities and inviting people to, just wine and chips. And it was amazing. It was so much fun, and I can't wait to do that again. But it opened up opportunities that I wasn't expecting. The whole business model that I had now was just from partnering with nurses, because I was trying to do everything myself, doing the coaching all myself, and then, found these nurse experts, and I'm like, all right, well, let's do this. This is what the nurses are asking me for, and making these partnerships. I've made some of my closest and best friends through the course directors that I have now.
A lot of problem for entrepreneurs and nursepreneurs is scaling. So how do you kind of tackle scaling?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's it's a tough one, because, and I'll tell you, I've been through a lot of my numbers, and I see like a lot of money coming into the business, and then I see like my paycheck that I pay myself, and I'm like, I'd be better off working at the hospital a lot of times, because it's hard to pay yourself, and you can't scale and keep scaling until you actually do pay yourself. And I'll tell you, there was a book that I read that really helped transform a lot of my thinking. It was called Profit First, and I think it's Mike Michaelwitz, but he talks about, paying yourself, because it's a huge problem that entrepreneurs do, is they don't pay themselves, and they burn out, and everything just kind of goes to crap from there. The second most important thing that I'm still working on to this day is standard operating procedures. And I never wanted to tackle these because they're so boring, and I have a hard time focusing on them because they're very detail oriented. I'm a very big picture person. But it has completely limited my ability to scale, because I can't hand things off, right? I can't say, oh, go do my email marketing. And they're like, well, what do I do? And it's like, oh my God, so you have to write everything down. And if you don't, you're stifling yourself.
Yeah, SOPs are a pain in the ass to write.
It's funny
Yeah.
because we had that issue a few months last year. Actually, we ran into that roadblock where just like we finally typed out what SOP means. We're like, so this is what we need to do.
We finally realized we had to offload some of the work because we couldn't all do it ourselves, and we always wanted to do it ourselves. And finally,
Yes.
when we hired out some people, the dream started to come together.
Yeah. So anybody listening, I think that's another great tip too, is just learning when you can't do so much and you just have to give away your work. I don't think it's like stingy. You're not like
Overactive in your own business.
you have to learn how to manage or be a leader instead of being the operator or the
Employee.
employee. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's really important, especially if you want to scale. I mean, we started one of the programs that I have that is really scaling very quickly, and the nurse that's running it has been very, and you're right, stingy is not the word, but she's been very like, I don't want to hire anybody, I can manage it. And I'm like, no, you can't manage it. And you're gonna have all these people, they're in the course board, they're in the Facebook group, they're DMing you, they're doing, one, we have to put boundaries around what the students can do and what they can't do. And two, I need somebody else in that group answering questions, because if you don't respond to your customers, they'll be like, oh, well, Katie doesn't get back to you, or, she doesn't bother, or you're not important enough. And then it unleashes a whole nother field of like stuff that you do not want to get into.
I think
that
we all
could
come
really
to
hurt you.
right. I think we all come to this consideration of, is your business running you, or are you running your business? And if your business is running you, well, you're not in the right place where you're supposed to be. Because we said before, you're basically an employee in your own creation, and you're never going to ever be able to scale and do more and ever increase your revenue or income, because you have to offload this work, because you can't take on anything new if you're still doing the old. And that's probably the biggest thing for scaling, I feel like.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Katie, where can people find you?
They can find us at nursepreneurs.com, and our social media is some variation of Nursepreneurs. So Instagram is nurse_preneur, and then Facebook is Nursepreneurs1. But yeah, we'd love to help. We like to help nurses, whether they are interested in a business, or a lot of times we talk nurses out of businesses as well. So we're always happy to help guide you in whatever direction works best.
Awesome. You have any questions for us, Katie?
Any what?
Any questions for us?
No, yeah. No, I'm sorry.
No, I was just curious. That's all.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this show. As you heard, all the nurses resources for entrepreneurship you can find at nursepreneur.com. Thank you so much, Katie, for being an amazing guest and sharing your knowledge on what it is to scale, grow, and transition maybe from bedside to being your own boss, right?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank
Katie.
you, guys.
Bye-bye, Katie.